a black. It looks like the Lambda shuttle. It looks like the shuttle Tidarium. Actually, come to think of it, it looks almost like the T-16 Skyhopper. It has 3 wings. The 2 side wings point down. The one sticking up in the back. Small cockpit. It's all black. Obviously, it's an Imperial ship, we assume, unless it's some other character we haven't heard of yet in their personal ship. It looks like it's an Imperial ship in the photograph for the Lego toy. It's got the Death Star in the background. But what I like about it is it's very boxy. It looks again like a precursor. It's not as cool looking, is my point. And that's what I like about it, is that when you look at it, it doesn't immediately jump out as, hey, that's awesome looking. It looks a little clunky. But I think that, to me, is very appealing. That, again, it doesn't look like the Lambda shuttle. It doesn't even look quite as good as the T-16 Skyhopper. It looks like a precursor to those. And so I'm really, really digging this design as it relates to, this movie going into A New Hope, and making sure that they are sort of retroactively designing these ships so that they match up with the original trilogy. And as I've mentioned before, one of my biggest complaints about the prequel trilogy, well, I shouldn't say complaints. The prequel trilogy just didn't do what it needed to do in reverse engineering the starships. I just didn't quite buy into it. I know what George Lucas was trying to do, and he even mentioned this in the commentary that I was talking about a moment ago. He mentioned that the Jedi Starfighters, they were wedges because he wanted them to mirror the Star Destroyers, because eventually those are the vehicles, and those that created those vehicles are the ones that are going to be creating the vehicles for the Empire, and so he wanted to mirror that. And I get that. I really like the look of the Jedi Starfighter in Revenge of the Sith, the one that's kind of a combo of a TIE fighter and the former Jedi Starfighter. I think that ship design is great, but again, it didn't quite do what it needed to do to match up to the original trilogy, to have you look at it and go, yeah, this looks like it took place 30 years before the original trilogy. But none of the prequels did. I mean, that was by design. He wanted that time period in those movies to speak more to a vibrant galaxy, not one that was under the oppression of the Empire. So I understand that. But looking at these pictures of just these Legos, or Lego, I should say, not plural. Again, just really excited for the look of this film, and yeah, they're cool. All right, let's get over to the Rogue One freak out and the truth about Rogue One. And I'm just going to go right to Anthony Breznican at entertainmentweekly.com. Anthony was one of the individuals. He was kind of the and we talked about this before The Force Awakens came out when we were doing the podcast, but Anthony was one of these individuals that when the rumors started to roll out, man, he was the first one to come in and either shut them down or confirm them. And he was the crusher of dreams for many of us who were waiting for that trailer for The Force Awakens to come out. But the one thing that I like about this, and Anthony Breznican, is that at least he can put to rest, if you trust what he has to say, you can put to rest rumors as it relates to these movies. So he's put out an article, and I'm just going to, rather than going back and diving into all of the rumors that took place, we'll just get right into Anthony Breznican's article and talk a little bit about it. So he writes this: over the past week, numerous stories have emerged about the reshoots on the first Star Wars standalone films, and the fans have become as nervous and confused as C-3PO at a Star Trek convention. I see what they made it funny. After reaching out to deeply placed sources on the movie and at Lucasfilm to sort out fact from fiction, they've learned details about the state of the project, who's involved in working on what new sequences, and what those scenes involve. Here's what is true. The film, which is about the rebels stealing the plans for the first Death Star just before the events of the 1977 original Star Wars movie, is undergoing 4 to 5 weeks of reshoots. and beginning this month and ending just days before the Star Wars Celebration fan event in London on July 15th. That's pretty exciting. Okay, so we've got reshoots taking place 4 or 5 weeks, and they'll be ending right before Star Wars Celebration and that event on July 15th. Okay. High-level sources at Lucasfilm, speaking anonymously, offer some details. Official studio sources declined to comment, saying they don't respond to rumors, so that makes sense. In what may reassure fans, reshoots were scheduled for the film even before a single scene was shot. It's standard practice now for large-scale films to build in additional weeks of shooting so filmmakers can tweak a movie after the first assembly cut. These reshoots were originally planned for the spring, but were bumped to midsummer to allow for extra time as director Gareth Edwards and the creative team decided what they want to alter. The changes that have been the changes have everything to do with clarity and character development, and all take place as inserts within scenes we've already shot, said one source on the project. Let me stop here real quick before we get into more of this article. You know, there's been a lot of talk this week as it relates to these rumors of people freaking out over this movie and concerned about this movie, and it really does drive at the heart of the love that we have for Star Wars. Star Wars, it's ours. Right? I mean, it just lives in a different galaxy than all other movie franchises. And I'm sure some people have the same type of fandom as it relates to Harry Potter. And, you know, I'm not dismissing that. But for many of us, though, the Star Wars universe exists just in a different place. We hold on to it tightly. We cherish it. It is about families. We care about it, and we want to make sure it's done right because so many of us are still holding on to what we had and what we held on to back when we were kids, when we saw these movies. I believe that over a long enough timeline, this will change. There will always be a handful of people that will continue to be affected by Star Wars. It's going to be handed down generation to generation. Its popularity will continue for many, many years to come. But as I mentioned and devoted almost an entire podcast to, you know, there's going to be a time when fans like myself and those fans that saw the movies in the theater, the original trilogy in the theater, will no longer be a part of the fandom anymore, just on a long enough timeline. And right now, you still have a lot of us that saw these films in the theater, whether it was this is going to change, you know, obviously as time goes by, because you have a group of people that saw them in the theater, that saw, you know, A New Hope, and then you have the group that saw Empire Strikes Back, and then you have the group that saw Return of the Jedi, and then you have the group that ended up being weaned on them on video and then were exposed to them later on, mostly through their parents. And so we're talking about a fandom that's going to live for a long, long time. The new fans, like my sons, 14 and 9 years, well, he'll be 14 in a few weeks, but for the sake of argument, 14 and 9 years old, I don't think they're going to carry on that same type of devotion and love and concern, and this is my point, and concern that we have, because so many of us are grabbing on to what that original trilogy meant and what it felt like and what we took home with us and what it meant and what it means to hold those toys in our hands. I still have out all my Star Wars vehicles that I pulled out about 3 weeks ago that I had planned on putting away. I still have them out here in my office/bedroom, and thankfully my wife Melinda hasn't made me go and put them away yet, but I like seeing them there, old and new. I like having my original figures there, and there is something that there are memories attached to those things. You know, I'm a huge Depeche Mode fan. I'm a massive Depeche Mode fan, and I see the same type of reaction as it relates to Star Wars as I do in Depeche Mode fans. every 4.5 years or so, Depeche Mode starts working on a new album, and the new album is going to be the last album they're ever going to do until they decide to go and do another album, and we're in that phase again where they're working on a new album, and we don't know who the producer is yet. There's all this speculation around who's producing the next Depeche Mode album. Well, why does it matter? Why do we care who the producer is? Why can't we just wait until the music comes out? Because for so many of us that are really hardcore Depeche Mode fans, we're grabbing on to albums like Black Celebration and Music for the Masses and Violator and to a somewhat lesser extent, even though it's one of my favorite albums by them, Songs of Faith and Devotion, because of what it did for us at that age growing up and what those albums meant to us. Not just about the music they produced, but what happened during that time frame in our lives that really ended up making us who we are today. And the same thing rings true for the hardcore Depeche Mode fans, and the same thing rings true for the hardcore Star Wars fans. And so when we have new movies and we're venturing out into an unknown place that involves a film, not a cartoon, not a comic book, not a novel, but when we're venturing out to an unknown place in Star Wars spin-off movies, there's a lot of us going, well, I wonder what this is going to do. I hope they get it right. And then you have a film that is going to be attached to the movie that started all of this. We care about our Star Wars because it is a huge part of our lives. And so when we start to think that things may be rotten, on Tatooine, we start to get worried. And we start to wonder, who's going to be the one to screw it up? Oh, is this going to be another prequel? And, they're going to take away the grittiness of it, because there's a lot of guys out there who want to see this be a true war movie, and they want it to be, raw and real. And so because of that, when these stories start getting talked about, and because the fandom isn't like a normal news outlet where they really have to worry about journalistic integrity, you're going to get a lot of false information out there. You're going to get a lot of fan sites that are going to push the reality of what's really going on just so they can drive clicks to their webpage. We care about this. We want it to be good, but we're also very, very worried that it's not. And we don't want anybody to go and screw up what it is that we love about Star Wars. It would be like somebody taking a Depeche Mode song and then going and messing around with it and not making it as good as it could have been. That's probably a really, really bad example. I don't even think I needed an example. I'm not sure why I gave an example. I'm going to forget that I gave that example, and we're going to move back over to this Entertainment Weekly article because I'm looking at the clock and realizing I still have a lot to talk about and very little time to do it. So, the changes of Rogue One involve intimate moments, not redoing entire battle sequences or plot lines. It's a lot of talking in cockpits, as the insider described the new footage. Now, the plan is to lock the picture in mid-August and begin scoring the movie in September, which would actually be an earlier timeline than The Force Awakens, which also underwent several weeks of summer reshoots and locked picture in October. And as we know, they went back and added levity to The Force Awakens. The scene with Kylo Ren and Poe Dameron on Jakku when he says, who talks first? You talk first, I talk first. That was all added in reshoots. For better or for worse, the prequel movies went through reshoots. The droid factory sequence, which I would argue you could get rid of. I like it, but there's the moment with C-3PO stuff in that just drives me nuts in Attack of the Clones. But the droid factory sequence on Geonosis in Attack of the Clones, that was all put in via reshoots. George Lucas saw the film, realized they landed on the planet and then immediately got caught, and then it took him a little while before there was a little bit of downtime before the action really ramped up to the Geonosian battle, arena sequence. And so they added in via CGI the droid factory sequence. There's some moments in there that are a lot of fun. I dig Anakin Skywalker in that droid factory sequence, just throwing stuff around and giving us a hint of what Vader does in The Empire Strikes Back. But again, the C-3PO moments and the "it's a nightmare," I think I've lost my head, or whatever he says. That's always been my complaint about Attack of the Clones. But those were all reshoots. The rumor that almost half the movie is being reshot elicits both laughter and groans from those closest to the film, says Anthony Bresnikan in the Entertainment Weekly article. While it might seem like spin control from those working on the film, their logic bears out. If we were rewriting the movie and reshooting 40% of the film, we would not be finishing in August. A source on